Hello, everybody out there in YouTube land. This is your T-shirted historian. Well, I normally do this with Grim, but I have not seen him today. And he hasn't posted a video this morning, which he usually posts one, so I'm a little bit concerned. I hope he's okay. Hopefully nothing's happened to him. Maybe he's got an internet outage, or I don't know. Maybe he's just taking a day off and didn't tell me. I don't know. But either way, I guess I got to roll with this solo. So here I am. So today we're talking about player motivation and how specifically that can work with sandboxes and things like that. So if you're a GM, you probably know that sometimes it's kind of hard to get players to do, well, anything. And I imagine it's especially much harder when you're trying to run a module or something, because modules obviously can't account for everything that players are going to want to do. And it's kind of rough. Now, I mean, obviously, if everyone is sitting down to game, everyone is expecting to do something, everyone's expecting to have a good time. Do I think it is incumbent on the GM to be the guy who necessarily makes all of the fun and entertainment, to move the story along or to make things happen? No, I absolutely do not believe that. I think if anything, it's the GM's job to arbitrate rules, create setting, atmosphere, run NPCs, things like that. Make things interesting and fun for players. But it's not his job to get out and push players to do stuff. It really isn't. Players who come sit down at the table should want to do stuff. They should want to play. They should want to be involved. Because, frankly, that's an escape. It's supposed to be fun. Games are supposed to be fun. If your people are at the game to play, they're there to have a good time. They're there to have fun. Ostensibly. When the game seems like it's more like work or a chore, or players are showing up with bad attitudes, or the attitude that maybe that they don't really want to be there, maybe it's time to either change up the game or start a new one, or just tell that player's like, hey, why don't you take the night off? You're obviously not feeling it. And that can be rough. But that's kind of the way it is. As a player myself, I've had times like that where I have shown up to the table and I didn't want to play. I felt like, no, I'm just going through the motions. I'm just here. I'd rather be doing anything else. I'm not having a good time, etc., etc. So, what contributes to that? If a player doesn't feel like they're engaged, or if they feel like other players are getting more spotlight than they are, those are things that can kind of demotivate players. Other things could be your player's character. Maybe it was a good concept to begin with, but maybe they've lost motivation for it, or they're not sure which direction to proceed with it. Sadly, I kind of think that 3.0 and 3.5 and Pathfinder First Edition have kind of had a contribution to this, and 5th Edition definitely has a contribution to this. And that is the metagaming perspective. The idea that you have to play a certain type of class. You have to play a certain type of class a certain type of way. You have to have these spells. You have to have this kind of character optimization. You have to have these stats. You have to play this race. You have to wear this armor. Have to. See the problem? When somebody else is basically telling you how to play your character, how much fun is that? Because that seems like that kind of sucks. I'll be honest. I'm guilty of taking an idea, a meta idea from other gaming books and other sources. I used to pretty famously, either keep a copy of Treant Monk's Guide, and I'm not casting any aspersions on Treant Monk. Treant Monk is a really well-learned, well-respected, well-loved guy. Including myself, I like him as well. But I used to keep a copy of Treant Monk's Guide, and if I knew we were going to be playing a game, and it was a new game or something like that starting out, the first thing I would do is go through Treant Monk's Guide to find the most optimized feats, character class, build, and everything else. Simply because, you don't want to be overshadowed by other people in the party, because that sucks. Right? How much fun is it to be in a party where you have another member of the party who pretty much guaranteed when they show up, the combats are going to be blow through, and they're not going to be fun. Right? You're not going to get to do very much outside of whatever role that you got pigeonholed into. If it's, look at the words that we use to describe character classes now. DPS, damage per second. That's from World of Warcraft largely, and from other, tactical-based games. DPS, damage per second. We're more concerned about how much damage your character can output than we are about any other factor in your character. That's your character's main thing, damage per second. Tank. Okay? This is a guy whose only job is to stand there and take hits for the party. Wow. That's quite a job. Hey, what's going on, Greg?
What's going on?
Well, getting into character motivations and stuff here. And then, of course, we've got healers, heal bots. Just the idea of being called a heal bot kind of sucks. And there are parties I've seen where they get pissed off at the cleric if the cleric is not doing their job to their satisfaction. Oh, you should be healing people. You should be doing this. You should be constantly doing this, that, or the other. Having all these expectations from other players at the table can be a big source of why you're not having a good time at a game, why you're not motivated to do anything, why you don't even want to be there.
It's the World of Warcraft effect. The introduction of terms like tank, heals, and DPS has been a disaster for the human race.
Yeah, it has. And Kit Marlowe has a really good point on this. Yeah, video game terminology is a plague. Tank, glass cannon, play loop, BBE, big bad evil guy. Yeah. Once everything becomes kind of tropey, that breaks the game down. But,
if you have a complex character with multiple abilities, role-playing opportunities, race stuff is involved, fantasy race, like mythical archetypes, like just distilling all that down into, I'm DPS. That's the worst. I can't stand it.
I agree. And right now I'm talking about, what demotivates players as much as anything else. And one of those is not having a clear character concept or having a character concept that is cookie cutter and meta and more or less created for you. Now, on the flip side, I have looked at other at other people's builds for fun character ideas and actually gotten some pretty good advice out of some of those things. Yeah, those builds do tend to be a little bit overpowered. And of course, it's always... I hate to say this as a player and as a DM. It's always fun if your character feels overpowered. Just because it's... you feel like you can overcome anything in the game. And, you feel like the real hero of your story. And I think that's one of the big motivation, demotivation factors for a lot of gamers is the fact that everyone who's sitting at that table individually feels like their character is the main character of the book, the story, whatever you want to call it, the narrative. Right?
Right. If we might have some kind of OSR adjacent people in here, but most of those type of people players would say, the biggest demotivating factor is not allowing player agency and allowing players to do whatever they want in the game, like an open sandbox. I'm like, no, I disagree with that idea. Like, yes, it's important that players have agency over their actions and can influence the world, but if the game starts out and you're in a tavern and there's a dark figure in a corner and there's a suggestion from an NPC that you go talk to him, that's no, I'm so demotivated, I'm not going to do this. I want to go outside and start my own business. Like, I just believe that there should be some kind of driver or so that doesn't demotivate players, in my opinion.
Well, my thought on it is, it's not so much, character creation is part of your motivating factor to do it. Having a character that is fun to play can motivate a player to do something to begin with. Like, if your character has lots of really cool abilities and you just want to try them all out, that can be a motivation to do something. Backstory, that can be a motivator, but I feel like to some extent, backstory is an excuse.
Yeah, what if it doesn't work?
Yeah, what if it doesn't work? Well, the other part of it, too, is if you let your backstory influence all of your character's decisions, actions, and everything else, you might start expecting your GM to comply with all of your desires and stuff out of, it's my backstory, or you need to accede to my backstory. You need to, respect my backstory. You need to work my backstory into it. And it's like, no, I really don't. I mean, if your backstory is cool, that's cool. I mean, and if I can use it, that's great. And I will. But it shouldn't be a requirement that a GM honor somebody's backstory.
No, not at all.
As part of their game. Ooh, Ironcaster. For $2, more Conan motivations needed. Crush your enemies. Yes, that's a perfect motivator too. And you know what? I don't have to crush your enemies. So let's see. Since he's out there in the audience, I'm thinking. It's Ironcaster. So
come with me, Monkey Land.
We always had to give him Monkey Land.
So how did this discussion begin? Was it something that prompted this, like something about like Sandbox versus Railroad or whatever?
No, it was actually just somebody's suggestion. And actually, I'm looking forward to people throwing more suggestions in the comments. I'd like to interact with comments more often. having an idea what players and characters and DMs and everything want to hear about helps us, build content. So this was a suggestion from one of our players. It's like, do something about motivations and stuff. Okay, well, talking about motivation, there is the DM side of motivation as well. As I started out by saying, it's not the DM's job to motivate your character. It's not the DM's job to push your party. It's not the DM's job to make you do anything. The DM is there to run the game, to create the setting for you, to run the NPCs, to help run the combats, to arbitrate disputes, etc., and have a good time doing those things. But the DM doesn't need to get out and push the party. The party should have its own motivations to do stuff.
Well, if, assuming we are talking about a classic fantasy game or a Dungeons and Dragons style game, I would agree.
Any game.
But in a game like mine, which is the Kaiju game, it's very mission-based because there's some wargaming elements there. So the players are beholden to superior officers, for example, and they get briefed and they have a goal and instructions for their mission, and they have to carry that out. That's so the GM kind of controls that flow.
Right.
So the motivation after that becomes the fun of killing things and getting up weapon upgrades and becoming more powerful and, that type of stuff.
Well, okay. Mission-based is a little different. And there are games like that. Cyberpunk tends to be kind of mission-based. Because it's always kind of like, you're always getting your next gig.
Yeah. Because if you don't do things like that, then you're not ever going to progress your character, because you need money, you need resources, you need to build allies and stuff like that.
Right. But your classic adventure type stuff isn't always necessarily mission based.
No. That's what I'm saying. Like classic adventure stuff, I agree. But there's other game types that might not necessarily need it.
Right. Well, we're those are kind of their own little deal there. But any kind of, but the thing is, where you have like sandbox based gaming, and sandbox can apply to any genre, whether it's post apocalyptic, space, and other stuff like that. In fact, this is one of the reasons why I have kind of some difficulty running sci-fi themed games, is because getting players motivated to do stuff in sci-fi based games is especially hard for some reason.
What for?
What for? 'Cause why?
Yeah, why is it hard?
'Cause why? Well, because there's so much that you can do, and yet there's so much that you can't do. And that's another thing that can demotivate players pretty badly too, is the can't syndrome. Can I do this? No, you can't. Can you do this? No, you can't. How about this? Can't do that. Eventually what you end up getting is players who get sick of that crap, and they want to start rebelling, or they start deliberately trying to sabotage your campaign. And sometimes you just get people who are at the campaign, they're not table, and they're not having a good day, and that's what they want to do, is just basically sabotage the game, because they think that's going to be fun for them. That's going to be interesting and amusing for them to sabotage the game. And of course it's going to piss everybody else off, but they don't care.
Murder hobos.
Not even necessarily murder hoboing. But just doing things just because they don't feel like they're getting any other involvement other than the fighting and stuff. And like I said, for sci-fi games, it's especially difficult, because in sci-fi games, it tends to be a case of if it's a sandbox, it's like, well, what's your character do for money? Well, I'm a bounty hunter. Okay. Well, unless everybody agrees to go hunting the bounty, you almost end up having to do that solo. Unless there's some way that you could incorporate the bounty that you're hunting down along with whatever everybody else is doing. If your sci-fi game involves, space truckers, trying to truck a load of stuff from one end of the galaxy to another, it's kind of like, well, it kind of seems like a little bit too much like a real job. You know what I mean?
Unless their ship is infected by aliens and they have to survive, or there's a lot of adventure opportunities in something like Traveler.
Yeah, supposedly. But I think a lot of times whenever people are thinking about sci-fi games, they're wanting either, well, I wouldn't say Star Trek because, again, that's mission-based, but like the Star Wars high adventure type stuff where, there's all kinds of crazy stuff happening, and, you can walk into the bar and, with all the nasty aliens and stuff like that and either shoot it out with somebody or get a secret mission or whatever.
So how do you handle it in Stars Without Number?
Stars Without Number, I basically handled it by, letting players do what they wanted to do. I said, okay, look, here's a ship. It's your ship. What do you want to do? And the players generally got into the idea of commerce. So they would basically try to truck loads of stuff, around the galaxy and then try to, basically play merchant captains. And it was an okay idea for a game. They weren't really like super duper motivated to do very much beyond just try to make money, I guess that's fun for some people. It's not fun for me as a DM because I'm just kind of like, okay, you made money. Are you happy? Okay, that's great. But if it's what they want to do, that does tend to make me want to end games early because it's kind of a case of, all right, well, you did your thing. There's a whole galaxy of stuff out there to check out. There's all kinds of ruins and crazy stuff out there to get involved in. There's like planets full of people to talk to and get involved in their personal day-to-day stuff, but you just kind of want to keep bouncing around from planet to planet, making money and not really getting involved with anything and not being tied down to anyone and not, that makes it more difficult. Because then at that point you're kind of like, you're back to the game of the players are waiting on the DM to make something happen. You see what I'm saying?
Unless they're going out and trying to make money on their own. But
no,
then they can sit there confused, yeah.
Well, no, that was their whole motivation was just, every time I'd have to sit there and generate a new planet with new inhabitants, they were always kind of like, ew, I don't like these inhabitants. Let's just get our cargo and move. Okay. The trip's going to take you a few days. You going to do anything during those days? No? Okay. Scoot time forward. Here we go. You're at your next destination. I'd check for encounters and stuff like that along the way, but outside of that, it was, it got very dull for me, and I expect it probably wasn't very entertaining for them either.
And that kind of leans back to some of my original thoughts is that that's why I prefer some kind of narrative at the beginning of the game provided for the players to follow. They can always choose not to do that, but the expectation is there, and you can always be like, before the game begins, you can say, this is probably going to be the best way for you to have fun at this game. If you deviate, you can do whatever you want, but this is going to be the mission or the adventure, that type of thing. Now that seems like railroading, and some people might not like that idea, but it does avoid the problems of players sitting there like lame ducks, just not knowing what to do or not not having any kind of drive or reason for acting.
Yeah. And that's the thing. It's like I don't want to spoon feed people the adventures. I like to run sandboxes. You know, I want people to get involved, make things happen, and I want players to feel like they can make a difference. I always used to try to have consequences in a lot of my games, so it would be like a case of, okay, well, you decided not to get involved with this thing that was haunting this village and stuff. The next time you pass by that village, there's guards posted up, around it. It's cordoned off. It's, there's all kinds of signs and stuff up where it says all dead inside, things like that,
Yeah.
Basically my way of telling players is like, you decided you didn't want to get involved in it. Whatever was going on kept happening. Nobody went in there to stop it, or whoever did failed. And since you weren't there to save them, they all died. Good job.
Wonderful
you
job.
wanted to keep traveling. So but that doesn't really work so much with a space game, because it's kind of like a case of, space is so wide open. It's like, you don't never have to visit the same planet twice, really. If you think about it, especially if you've got mechanics like FTL drives and stuff like that. And again, this also kind of goes back to character creation and player motivation. It's like, what kind of character is your character? If your character is like a lazy bastard who just wants to sit in a bar all day and drink and whore and everything else, it's like, well, that's fine. That's not much of a motivation. I can't see why your character would adventure, except, of course, you run out of money. And I mean, if that's your motivation, then that's fine, but I don't know. I've seen players who play characters who are like super duper laid back, don't want to get involved in anything, and only fight when they have to, and it doesn't matter how many interesting things you throw at the character, they just stubbornly refuse to get involved with it. And at that point, it's kind of like, well, why am I even doing this?
No, it definitely doesn't sound like the DM's problem to solve, though, in that case.
Yeah. It shouldn't be anyway. But then, of course, afterward, you got players who are going, well, I just didn't have fun. I didn't feel like you were doing anything with my character. Well, your character wasn't doing anything. It's kind of a weird catch-22.
Yeah, to be honest, though, that does seem like an edge case.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know how often it happens to you, but I feel like that's not the norm for most tables anyway. At least even for open sandbox tables, I feel like most of the party members are probably going to be on the same page. They might not be, but if you've got a player like that at the table, I would question their motivations as a person for why they're even playing the game.
Exactly. Yeah. It's almost a case of, it's like, well, why are you here?
Yeah.
Did you come here to game, or did you just come here to be bored? I mean, if you just came here to listen and not interact, and why did we build you a character? Or why did you build a character? You should have just said you wanted to spectate. I'm
right.
Okay with spectators. But yeah, it shouldn't be up to the GM to motivate players. It shouldn't be up to a GM to spoon feed them adventures. It shouldn't be up to a GM to make any of that stuff happen. Now, there is a difference between spoon feeding people adventures and helping them along. Like if it's the case of, the players are about to make a bad decision, and you do the infamous, "Are you sure you want to do that?"
Matt Mercer.
I mean, some people would say, well, that's, you're railroading by doing that, or you're taking away player agency by doing that. You should just let them, try it and fail and whatever. And it's kind of like, well, yes, but it kind of comes down to a case of maybe the players don't necessarily see what you see, but that on some level their characters would either know or see, and maybe have a little bit more self-preservation instincts, because it does kind of boil down to a case of where at some point players are detached from their characters and don't necessarily think about the consequences of what can happen to them if they don't think through their actions, or don't understand what kind of danger that their actions could put them in. And I mean, you could always use like subtle hints and stuff like that. As like, it's like, you're pretty sure, that pool of clear liquid in front of you, it has an odd smell to it. You accidentally kicked a rock into it as you were walking up, and you saw like a little hiss of smoke and stuff when that rock went in. For some reason, the pool really seems extremely clean. Little hints like that, to keep players from doing something stupid like, I'm going to dive into the big giant pool of acid. Now, if they know it's a big giant pool of acid and they dive in anyway, it's kind of like, okay, well, you did it.
You know what kind of games I run anyway for my close friends, which are very narrative. But I almost always have an NPC with the party to help them with those types of things, rather than providing direction directly as a GM. Maybe I'll have my own. Yeah.
That's another way of handling it. I don't know. It just kind of depends on your approach. Like I said, I kind of try to think of it like from the character's point of view. It's like, I'm not playing your character for you. I'm just helping inform you of things that your character may be thinking about when they see this or observe this. So it's kind of up to you how you choose to act on the information I'm providing you.
Why do you hate your players so much, T-shirt? What's the problem?
I don't hate my players. I don't hate my players. I like my players. I don't want them to get upset and pissed off and quit the game. Especially if I'm having fun with it,
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, the fact is, it's like, players without motivation, it's like you could sit there and you could have a staring contest with your players after a while, and they'll be like, okay, so let's do something. Okay, well, I described the scenario for you. I told you where you were. I told you everything about where you're at. So it's up to you to do something from here. I'm not, adventures don't necessarily just fall out of the sky for you, or sometimes they do, but
right.
But it's not a case of, the Dark Lord's not just going to show up and just like say, you must come face me at my mountain or whatever.
Well, he might.
He might.
That's what I'm saying.
But the point is, you shouldn't spoon feed necessarily your players. If they're not motivated to do something, just let them face the consequences of their inactivity. Is kind of my thing. It's like, if you show up at if the scenario you had in mind was, players show up at a town, the town is overrun by vampires or something like that. It's like, then the players just choose not to get involved, try to move along. It's like, okay. A couple days later, they find out that not only has that town been wiped out, but there's now an epidemic of vampires throughout the country. And if you're a low level, well, even if you're a high level character, it's vampires are kind of a threat. The level drains and all that stuff is just nasty. Plus, smarter vampires are going to have all kinds of servants, traps, tricks, and all this other stuff. I don't necessarily know that I'd use vampires. Just kind of on a tangent here. Another YouTuber was talking about how vampires are stupid for monsters because everybody knows what they are, even on some kind of a meta level, and will act on the information, even if they're trying not to. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, if you arrive at a town and people are anemic and you see, like, 2 small wounds and stuff on the characters' necks and stuff like that, it's like, oh, vampire. So,
of course. Yeah, choosing, trying to overcome those types of things can be difficult for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Meta gaming is what we used to call it.
Yeah, metagaming is a whole nother dungeon and discussion episode, though, I think. I'm not even sure you could really talk about metagaming for an hour.
Probably not.
Probably not. I mean, it'd just be a case of metagaming. It sucks. Don't do it. There you go. Thank you very much.
Thank you for
Hope you enjoyed
my TED Talk.
Yes. Thank you for coming to my Dungeons and Discussions. We don't do TED Talks. As far as sandboxes go and motivating players, depending on the kind of sandbox you're running, the nice thing about sandbox gaming is you kind of have a big giant sandbox world for them to play in. And I would say look at actual video game sandboxes. GTA, Cyberpunk, any of the other big sandbox type video game type things. Certain things are supposed to happen at certain times, depending on where you're at in those video games, right? To kick off a scenario or to kick off an adventure. Yeah, make the same thing happen in your sandbox, Have it kind of set up ahead of time. If the players walk into this place, this is going on. They can choose to get involved. They can choose not to. If they choose not to, okay. Well, that sandbox is that scenario is going to continue on to its eventual conclusion. Players can deal with the fallout afterward. Speaking of sandboxes, Fallout. Yeah, see, that's another one. And it doesn't become a case of, like, oh no, the players must be there to interact in order to continue to advance a storyline or anything like that. It's like, the nice thing with sandboxes is they're going to happen whether you're there or not. That's an interesting way of putting it, Delver. So yeah, being a DM is about extending gambits to players. Players may or may not accept a given gambit, but the conscientious DM will be subtle enough that they won't recognize one until they've taken it. Yeah, there is that. Swordpoof says the village they just passed through has been all but wiped out, and survivors remember them passing through and blame them for the deaths. Now they're being hunted by angry villagers. Yeah, exactly. Having consequences to player actions is a motivator in and of itself. And it's a powerful one, especially if players failed. Straight up, failure is actually a really strong motivator. And also one of the reasons why I don't believe in fudging dice rolls.
No, I don't believe in that at all.
I don't believe in it. That's why I roll open. It's kind of like, okay, well, what happens, happens. Just recently, in the Cities Without Number game that I had going on, the it's kind of hard to say good guy, but the person who was not supposed to be an adversary to the players happened to arrive on a transport full of basically it was a big gunship that was full of guys, and one of the PCs got to the roof, saw the gunship, and just immediately said, "Oh, I'm going to attack it." I'm like, okay. So he did. He attacked the gunship. Gunship fired back, kind of obliterated the player, although he did survive. And then, of course, the players' hench dogs attacked the same vehicle, and all the guys who were on board the vehicle after they destroyed that got out and killed all the dogs. So it's kind of like, okay, well, hey, you did something and something happened. There you go.
Welcome to the game.
Welcome to the game. He wasn't upset about it or anything, and that's fine. I mean, he was all right with it, and that's an okay thing. And that is kind of another motivation thing too. Sometimes sometimes players will kind of push your boundaries, test your limits, and see what you'll do as a GM. So they will do stuff that may run contraindicated to what you think. In which case, hey man, give them exactly what they deserve. Players who like okay, if you have a bunch of like third or fourth levels and they run into an ancient red dragon, and the ancient red dragon is maybe amused by them, but not necessarily willing to kill them outright, just because they're amusing. Maybe it'll use them as a source for something else, and you have ideas as a GM for what you can do with those characters. But you get the one guy who's like, "I will fight you, I will smite you, evil dragon," and he keeps lipping off at the dragon. It's like, you're making it real hard for me to let you live, but okay. This is the consequences of your action. But sometimes it's a case of, the players like pushing things. They don't really believe that you'll squash them.
Oh, they're going to get squashed.
Yeah. Or they think that somehow you'll spare their character because they're the hero. They have that, like I said, everybody thinks that they're the hero. And it's like, well, you kind of are, but, a part of being a hero too is also kind of having a sense of self-preservation and knowing when to be a hero, or having the discretion to know when to fight and when to talk and when to listen. So, and as Kip Marlowe says here, says, no, metagaming, depending on definition, can make RPGs great. We all know what bad metagaming is, but the leading of player knowledge and character knowledge can be an excellent tool. I don't know, but see, that's almost a case of metagaming in and of itself. If the player doesn't think that the GM will kill their characters, or he knows that they won't, that is also kind of a form of metagaming. Especially if it's something like between spouses or something. Oh no. How many times have you seen the game where the husband's running the game and the wife is playing in the game, and it becomes I don't want to sleep on the couch tonight.
I've seen that.
Yeah, I've seen that. I always appreciate it whenever, the husband and wife gamers, will kind of respect that, and the wife won't necessarily go out of her way to antagonize the husband GM or whatever, but I've seen it happen before. I've also seen games where hubby GM just everything kind of kept going in the wife's favor all night.
Of course. Yeah, sometimes that's what they do. They love to do that shit.
Uh-huh.
So I guess his motivation for playing the game in that case was to make his wife happy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And yeah, Disciple says, yeah, the worst is the DM who's hoping to date one of the players.
Oh boy.
Yeah. Simping. And,
It's like some
it says,
DM horror story stuff right there.
it is. It says, right. Plot armor leads to boredom, which leads to extreme behavior to try and generate risk. Round and round it goes until players simply decide to commit genocide. Yeah. Exactly. But yeah, speaking back on failure as a motivational tool, the players don't necessarily have to win every single fight. And people are always trying to say that as part of their excuse for fudging and everything like that. It's like, oh, well, how cool is that to let your first level players, get killed by a bunch of kobolds? Well, who says they have to die?
They can run away.
Yeah, they can run away. Get smarter, come back and fight them again. And as we pointed out in the hit points discussion last week, even in second edition D&D, actually I say in first edition D&D, in the DMG, there are rules there that say that, characters can take hits and go as far as -10 hit points. They don't necessarily die at 0. And certainly with 5th edition being as forgiving as it is, and 3.5 also following the -10 rule and everything else, and all these other game systems having stuff in place where it's not necessarily, oh, you hit 0, you're dead. Just because the party's defeated by a bunch of kobolds or a bunch of goblins or orcs or whatever, it doesn't mean that that's game over. That can be part of your motivation for your players to do things past that. I mean, look at Goblin Slayer. The whole anime is basically based on a failed encounter with goblins, right? Because the guy starts out and his house is attacked by goblins and they kill and do horrible things to his sister, and he's basically forced to cower down, in hiding and watch the whole thing happen. And that becomes his motivation to go out and kill goblins. There you go. Same thing. Just, okay, your players, got ambushed and killed by a bunch of kobolds, or they got their asses beat by a bunch of kobolds. They're not necessarily dead, kobolds can tie them up and, try to have them for snacks, or could take all their shit, or whatever. Let that be a motivator for characters, if nothing else. Revenge is a wonderful motivational tool. Yeah, exactly, Leopold Duck. Yeah, players losing fights or having draws adds narrative plot. Morale checks, having enemies run away for another day means they can come back. Yeah, exactly. And don't be afraid to use your morale checks as a motivator. I have one player at the table who will not let enemies escape. It doesn't matter how much the characters are winning. He will actively run after, chase after, hunt down enemies. Now, how you can flip that on people like that is, okay, you're chasing after the lone goblin that was running away. Well, who he was running away to was another group of goblins he knew was nearby. So now you've got this one PC who is suddenly surrounded by a whole fresh group of goblins all by himself. What's your motivation now? You still want to try to take this one goblin down? And if they do, if they want to just go down swinging, it's like, okay, well, guess what? Your character just became motivation for the rest of the party, because after those goblins whoop your ass, the rest of the party is going to have to come find out what happened to you. Congratulations. Thank you for creating motivation for me. You know? But yeah, players should have some kind of motivation when they show up to the game. They shouldn't be necessarily motivated by being pigeonholed into a specific class or build. You know, the meta PC narrative thing is just, it's bad. And 5e is very much guilty of that. You know? Oh, only play this kind of barbarian, the totem barbarian. It's the strongest barbarian in the whole game. If you put it together with, well, I was going to say put it together with this race, but that doesn't matter anymore because race is a skin suit. So now it's basically, yeah, just put these particular sets of attributes together, build this particular type of character in this particular type of class, and your character will be super duper powerful and awesome. Well, yeah, that's really cool. I mean, yeah, I did want to play a barbarian and I did want to be effective and stuff, but you know, I'm basically just playing somebody else's character at that point. You know? I didn't want to be a folk hero. I wanted to be a, you know, wood carver or something else as a background. But folk hero gives you all this other stuff, huh?
3rd edition started that trend.
Yes, yeah, I mentioned that. 3rd edition started that. 3.5 pushed it. Pathfinder 1st edition pushed it. I don't know how much 4th edition did for it, because honestly, 4th edition is the edition we don't talk about. But yeah, starting with 3.0, meta, builds, optimization, min-maxing, all this kind of stuff kind of took away a lot of motivation to play. I'll tell you what did give me motivation way back in the day. You remember back in how 1st edition D&D, you had to have a certain set of stats in particular to play paladins, rangers, and monks?
Yes.
Right. Wasn't that something? If you just happen to roll the magical set of, you know, attributes that could allow you to play one of those classes, that was a hell of a motivator, because it's like, now you have access to a class that's not normally seen. Will you play it or will you not? And I do kind of miss that aspect of things. Hyperborea does this. The game Hyperborea has basically where you have to have certain sets of stats in order to play certain classes, and so it keeps classes kind of I shouldn't say gate kept, because that's gatekeeping is a bad word, but it does keep certain classes kind of walled off from other classes, or it keeps you from seeing as many as often, unless of course you're using a really liberal you know, ability score generation system, in which case then, you know, people are pretty much just picking whatever class they want to. But yeah, one of your motivations when you're building your character should be play the character you want to. Okay? So what if it's not optimized? So what if it's not perfect? So what if you're not the best at everything?
Indeed. T-shirt, I'm going to have to bail. I have to go to a meeting now. I am still at work.
I understand. Well, that's okay. We're ending in about 4 minutes. So
yeah. Thanks for having me on, though.
No problem, Greg. Thanks for being here.
Okay.
All right. So, kind of wrapping things up. Players should come to the table with a motivation. They should have a character that they want to play because it's interesting, because the character has something that they want to do, has something they want to accomplish. And it may not be a big thing. It may not be a major thing. You know, maybe Maybe the character wants to, be the best cook, in the kingdom. Okay, well, you got a motivation hook right there, GM. You can look at that motivation hook and you can think of, well, okay, so this character wants to focus on cooking, so now I need to remember to, highlight when they come across ingredients and stuff like that so that they can use it in their cooking. And the reason I mention this is because obviously that's kind of a fascination of mine. Is delicious in dungeon and campfire cooking in another world. Obviously, if I play another game that's fantasy based and lasts longer than a one shot, Grim, I would like to be I would like to involve myself in some more cooking type escapades, just because I think it would be fun and it would be a nice motivational factor for me as a player, to try to find new things. Oh, look, we just killed this wyvern. I wonder how wyvern tastes. Well, let's find out. Or you come upon a bunch of juicy looking beetles. I bet we can find ways to make these things. Have fun with your character. Don't be afraid to push them to try things. And if you do have that one character in the party, you're always going to have that one person in the party who is overpowered, who has min-maxed, who has built their character up to be basically a meme. Let them. I mean, obviously that's what they have fun doing. That's what motivates them, is to be overpowered. You do your thing. Let the GM create the setting. You just involve yourself with the setting. And GMs make, when you create a setting and all that, make it interesting enough to where players will want to get hooked into stuff. Give them a chance to interact with stuff. Don't just, resist the urge to blow time by, especially when it comes to travel, because traveling is part of the fun of the game in itself. Okay, it's going to take you 2 days to get to, the lost mines of Zeppelin or whatever. Okay, that's cool. Well, your first day on the road, your first couple of hours, you run across, a burning barn. Maybe they want to get involved, maybe they don't. If they don't, consequences. Second day on the road, a group of travelers, being picked over by gnolls or something and eaten. Do they want to get involved? Maybe, maybe not. If not, consequences. Give players stuff to do, to interact with. Don't be afraid to describe stuff for players to interact with. Don't be afraid to, ham up your descriptions if you have to. Have fun with it. Give them hooks to get attached to. And players, have an idea what you want to do. It's not up to your GM to spoon feed you the adventure. If a GM describes a wall with some interesting writing or something like that, go check out the writing. Go get involved. If there's a panel with a bunch of buttons on it, go push them. Go see what they're going to do. Yeah, your character might get killed. Your character might get turned into a toad. Your character might get cursed. Your character might trigger a trap. Your character might spring a bunch of monsters on them. It's okay. You're having fun. You're there to have fun. Your GM's going to have fun springing things on you. You're going to have fun fighting them off. You're going to have fun whether you pass or fail, because it's not pass or fail. It's, are you having fun? Are you interacting? Are you rolling dice? Yes. Okay. Let that be your motivation. Don't be afraid to get involved. All right, everybody. Well, this is your T-shirt historian. Don't know what happened to Grim today, but I hope he's okay. I guess I'm going to go find out after the show. till next week, hang out and have a great week. And we'll see you next week.
Look! A Dungeons and Dragons ride!